Hello everyone, welcome back to this Sketchup for iPad channel where we explore how to leverage Sketchup for iPad as a workflow for architecture. We're also going to touch up on morfolio trace a little bit, but I thought what we would do is maybe just use an example here to illustrate, how to use SketchUp for iPad in the Edith Farnsworth house by Mies van der Rohe. I thought would be a perfect example to perhaps get us started here. So the house has been beautifully illustrated, and drawings have been prepared by the Historic American Buildings Survey, which can be found in the Library of Congress website. So they become a very useful tool for us to organize our workflow here. So the first things we do, we go to the website, Library of Congress, and you can search for the drawings there, and they have a variety of resolutions. Obviously, we try to get the highest resolution we can get so that we get the best readability possible. So in here, we're going to maybe take a look at the floor plan and see if we have also some elevation drawings, some interior details, and some exterior details that are fairly well drawn so that we can get a sense of how the house was constructed and get some dimensional vertical dimensions as we go along. So we're going to start in our file. We're going to go to the architecture feet and inches template and say create new, and we see our blank file that we can start drawing on. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in one of these floor plans into SketchUp, and so we're going to select the first option there to import as an image file. And so we now go to our library, which I have now downloaded and saved in the Photos app of the iPad. And I can we can click the drawing in any area where we would like. We're not going to be too concerned with the scale. We need to now click a second time to set the size of the drawing. And it's not to any particular scale at the time, but we're going to fix that shortly. And we see here that we have some dimensions, really good dimensions to go by. We're going to go to the preferences, and under general, the texture setting, we have the ability to use high resolution textures, and this will become useful to be able to allow us to read some of the dimensions, some of that smaller text. So we're going to try this one more time, import the image, and this time I'm going to import a larger resolution file that I downloaded from the Library of Congress website. And we're going to click on the left and then click on the right to set our drawing in. And so now we've imported this drawing, and so this larger resolution file, you can see that the text is really crisp as you zoom in. And again, that's a result of general settings and just having that texture, high resolution texture selected. We're also going to set our snapping and our precision here. So we're going to set that to 1 inch under model info, and then set our snapping to 1 inch. Just kind of helps you as you're drawing have a little bit more accuracy, at least to the inch. So now to set our scale, we're going to use our tape measure tool and take a dimension line there from that point there all the way up to the right hand side, and you see that the 1 inch snapping, because of the scale is drawing presently, it's not letting us get really close to that line. So what we're going to do for now is going to scale up this drawing, and it doesn't matter what scale, just scaling it up to something larger than what we have there now. And now we're going to try this one more time. Take the tape measure tool, go from that line there that we know we're being told is 44 feet, go to this other line in here, click a second time, tap on the dialog box, 44 feet. SketchUp is going to ask us, do you really want to resize the drawing? We say yes, and so now we have a drawing that is to scale, and we can use that as a good underlay to begin modeling. So we're going to just do a double check here of the dimension, use our tape measure again. Sure enough, 44 feet out to out there. And just something that I like to do, and it's really just a personal preference. I always like to move the drawing close to the origin so that I have kind of a frame of reference there. So snapping to the origin there on the corner of the drawing. So we can now pan around and just get a good view here of the home. And I guess what we need now is perhaps another drawing that gives us some vertical information. So we're going to do our same process again of importing a drawing, but this time we're going to be looking for an elevation drawing. So we have saved one in our iPhotos library. So we do the same thing. We snap once to place it, snap a second time to set the scale of it, but we're not going to be too worried about the scale. We're going to fix that later relative to the plan. Just bring that drawing a little bit closer into relationship with the plan, and just inspecting and making sure that's readable. We're going to bring this over to the corner there, and assuming that the two drawings are the same scale, you should be able to scale this up and snap it to the other drawing and at least get fairly close in scale. So we're going to check that here briefly by just taking a quick dimension line on that scale bar there, and we see that sure enough is 5 feet. So we're in the ballpark. I'm going to reduce the brightness of the screen here. Just having trouble with the movie capture device here, but hopefully that's a little bit better for you all. So we're going to take this drawing and we're going to perhaps rotate it vertically. So what we're going to do is take our rotate tool, and you can see they're snapping to the z-axis, but we can change that. We can change it to the red axis, and you see the protractor there kind of flip to the red, and we can click for setting the origin, click to set up a reference line, and see the feedback that the app gives you as you rotate around, gives you the angles, and it's snapping in smaller increments. So we set that to 90 degrees, and so now it's completely vertical, so we can now use our move tool and bring that closer in relationship to the plan drawing. And so in here we're just looking for an alignment between the plan and the elevation. We're going to take this floor slab here, the bottom of it, and just move it down, then move it across to just get those two drawings to be in relationship with one another. You can see that the columns are lining up, both in plan and in elevation, and then move this up to where the drawing is suggesting to us the ground plane is. We're going to create a tag here to begin organizing our drawing, and you'll see me do this as we draw this along, just creating tags. So we have now created our tag, and we can use the tag tool here, which quite honestly I haven't quite figured out how to use yet, but the idea is that you can now select objects and just put them in their correct tag. But what I'm going to do in here instead is just a slightly different workflow, and that is I'm going to select some of these elements here, and by just simply swiping from right to left, those objects get assigned to that particular tag, which is kind of a quick way that's worked for me in the past. So now these two images are in a tag called image. I'm going to take the elevation drawing and just hide it temporarily, just to get out of the way so that I can begin drawing in the plan. So we can do our context menu at the bottom and select hide, and we can now begin making the floor. So for that, we're going to go to our rectangle tool and snap there in the corner and bring the big old rectangle all the way across. We know the dimensions if we follow the plan, and we can just snap a second time there and type in our dimensions in the dialog box, and so we get a perfectly drawn rectangle that we can begin to use for our floor. The other thing I like to do as I'm drawing this, just as I begin to draw, is change the styles and change the face setting to X-ray mode. And what happens is that you're now able to see through your geometry into the drawing, and just that when you're starting to model, it helps me being able to see the reference drawing behind the modeling. Now, obviously, when your drawing gets very complex, this begins to lose its value because there's just too many lines in the way. But when you're starting out, it just becomes a quick way to be able to see all of your drawings and the modeling at the same time. We're going to consult here the drawings from the building survey to get a sense of how thick to draw this floor assembly. And what I'm finding is that it's about 14 inches or thereabouts, that C channel there. So in our model, we're going to take the, I guess, the simpler route and just extrude this element up. First, we're going to bring it up to the right elevation. And because we have our snap set to 1 inch and our precision to 1 inch, we don't have to worry so much about where that is in space, other than that, make sure that it's close. And then extrude it down 14 inches, which we've now seen here. And we're going to immediately create another tag and call that floor. So we'll place our floor in that tag so that we can just continue to organize our model. That way, so you can see there, just a simple swipe from right to left to put that element in that tag. So we're going to rotate now and just move around the file here and just create some guidelines for our columns. And so we note that the grid line is about 22 feet apart, and it's about a little over 5 feet from the edge there. So we're going to make our first grid line there, and then use the same tape tool, guide tool, to create the next grid line 22 feet apart. And then we're going to just take a quick shortcut here, just make a selection of that guideline and use the move tool in copy mode to copy it over 22 feet. And having done that, you can now follow it up with a ×2, and that makes a copy of it. So now you have the 4 grid lines there, equally spaced at 22 feet. So these columns, they're about 8-inch square, and they're roughly about 4 inches from the face of the building. And so what we can do here is just consult our drawings and just get a sense of that detail. We won't comment on the energy conservation qualities of this particular detail. That would be subject for a very lengthy other video. But in here, it suffices to just get a sense of how the detail is arranged and how the windows are attached to that column, and just get the general disposition of that. And so we can zoom in now. And there's probably a number of ways to do this. I'm drawing a 4-inch grid line out from the face of the building, but the column itself, there's probably some patterns you can draw from the 3D warehouse, and that would be fine. And here we're just going to draw a quick representation of the column. And like I said, there's probably a number of ways of doing this. What I chose to do here is to draw half of the column, just to try it out and see how quickly we can get to a full column here. We make that a component, and this rectangle here is 4 inches by 8 inches, so it really represents half of the column. We're going to create that component, and we're going to then now copy it to the right. And after we copy it, it makes sense to flip it along the component's red, so that both components are back to back and they're essentially mirroring each other. So we can now go to one component and use one of my favorite tools in SketchUp for iPad, the lasso selection tool. We can loop around and just grab those three edges. That's all I need. And we can then take the offset tool and offset that. Doesn't really matter how much, just something that maybe looks convincing for our purposes. And we use the eraser tool and the Apple Pencil to just simply erase that line. Just a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to do now with the Apple Pencil. We're going to grab this edge and just move it a little closer just to make a slightly more informed representation of that flange of the column. And we're seeing here that the snapping behavior is getting in the way of us moving that line in. So we're going to temporarily increase the accuracy of the drawing just to kind of slide that in a little bit closer. So now we have a thinner web and thicker flange to the column. So it's just a little representational of what those columns are. We can now take that line there and hide it. And we could stop here and just leave it like this and just make multiple copies of this. But we're going to take it one step further and maybe just take the whole thing and make it into a component, both of these elements. So now we're going to call that steel column. And after having done that, we can now go into these two components inside of this larger column component, and we can explode them. We don't need them to be separate anymore. So we can now take that line in between, the hidden line, and just delete it. So now we have a column perfectly symmetrical, and we can take this and extrude it up. Now at this point, I'm going to turn off the X-ray face mode so that I can see a little bit better what I'm doing here, and move this column over to the guide grid lines that I have set up in the previous step. So now in here, I can maybe take this column and slide it over so that it's aligned with the grid. And you see me there using my left hand to constrain to the green axis. So that's one of the wonderful things about putting the that contextual menu there on the left-hand side. You can use your non-drawing hand to constrain geometry as you're moving it or copying it. So here we're starting right to the floor line, and so we have now completed the beginning of our column. We can now then use this one column to make copies of it, make use of the fact that it's a component to array it around the plan. So we're going to take another look at the drawings here and the detail to get a sense of the thickness of that roof and the profile of it. We're going to make use of my friend here, Morfolio Trace, to use the scale capabilities of Morfolio Trace to get some better dimensions and better understanding of the detail. We're going to take this drawing into Morfolio Trace, and there's kind of a quick way of doing it where you can select the drawing and share it, and Morfolio Trace is one of the options there, so you can go straight into it. Click on that to open it. Once you switch over to the app, it'll pop up as one of the imported drawings there at the top. So there you have it. Now we can use the scale tool to take a dimension line on that scale bar, and we can start analyzing, looking at the detail a little more closely. So we're told it's 1 foot, 3 inches equals 1 foot. So we can now go back and examine that detail further. Use the scale ruler, confirming the floor line there, what we had, roughly about 13, 14 inches. And we can go back to the roof assembly. It's about 18 inches, 19 inches roughly, thereabouts. Just trying to get a dimension here to get us started. We can always come back and adjust things as necessary. So here we are back in SketchUp. Swiped our way into the model. Just take a look at the drawings again. Just look at the profile dimensions. So swiping my way back in to the model, and we're going to unhide all. So now we need some elevation information here. So this is where the elevation drawing becomes handy. And use our constraint tool to maybe take the floor, make a copy of it, to use that as our point of departure for the roof line. So we've now moved that up about 10'6" roughly. And we have to change its thickness. Obviously, we learned that it's a little bit broader, a little bit wider, about 18, 19 inches or so. So we can take this rectangle here and just go into it. It's a group cube, sort of shaped slab, if you will, and push and pull that up the amount that we need for the roof line. Now, there's a little bit of a detailing here. You'll notice there's kind of a fascia that's surrounding the whole perimeter of the roof. So we're going to take a closer look at that and swipe our way back into the drawing. And you can see there it is. It's sort of a steel angle that's kind of containing some of the insulation and the roofing material. And the whole thing is about 6 inches tall. And that's that fascia detail that we're seeing in there. So we're going to go into our roof assembly here and the roof slab and draw a small rectangle here that's representative of that fascia. We're going to bring it out 2-3 inches and then come down another 6 and then back onto itself. Now we can select the top face and go into our follow me tool and do a long click on that face, and there you have it. You have the fascia surrounding the entire roof structure there. So I was thinking about maybe taking this roof slab and maybe deleting it, but the more I thought about it, there is a slight sort of projection of this fascia. So why not? Why not just draw that as well? So undoing and going back, doing the double tap to undo and get that face back, and then pushing that down a couple of inches to get the detailing there um, of that roof line. So now we can take our column and just begin to array it in the plan, so we can make a copy of it and slide it along the y-axis, the green axis. And one of the nice things about working on SketchUp for iPad is that you can zoom in and out as you're moving this. So if you need to move it to a place where it's off the screen, you can pan your way around that. Yeah. So now we can take these columns and maybe just pull them all the way up. And in here, we're going to select the bottom of this little fascia detail here, and that'll complete our column. So we're going to swipe left one more time to just take a look at that detail and perhaps examine some of the other details we have here. So just as a test, I'm going to just draw in here, knowing that we're sort of to scale here, and draw the column in this side view here, just to understand the relationship of the top of the column, just confirming that the top of the column just goes to the bottom of that fascia detail. And so just picking some lines in here, just kind of drawing all the way down our column, drawing that double line for the flanges. And it does project quite a bit from the face of the building there in the fascia. So that's roughly the column in elevation there, or in the section rather. And so now we can perhaps hide our drawings from view and just select those two columns. We'll do the add modifier on the selection and use the move tool in copy mode and actually in stamp mode, and be able to just follow along the red axis and just stamp these columns along the way. And so with that, we have the main structure of the building started. So in the next video, we'll start to take a look at the balcony platform and perhaps the window platform, the window details as we move forward.